This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Batman Universe Comic Podcast. I'm your host, Dustin. Today I have with me...
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
And we're bringing the latest comic news and comic book reviews from the weeks of June 30th through July 13th. We have a total of 2 books to cover, just one piece of news, and we have a slew of Monkey Watch questions, specifically because I thought this was going to be a shorter episode. So I reached out in our Discord and asked listeners and fans for questions that you'd like us to answer. So we're going to get into those questions later in the episode, obviously, but we're going to jump straight into the comic news first. Like I said, we only have one thing to cover. On July 11th, DC announced that there is yet another new addition to DC Black Label. This one will be coming around in October. It's called Joker Killer Smile and is the latest miniseries to join the line. This is coming from writer Jeff Lemire with art by Andrea Sorrentino. The series will release its first issue on October 30th. This series is planned to be 3 issues long and release every other month, just like some of the other recent announcements. The solicitation says in Joker Killer Smile, Lemire and Sorrentino will share their own interpretation of one of the darkest characters of the Batman mythos, the Joker. For years, the Joker has terrorized Gotham, facing off with Batman time and time again, but now he's found a new adversary, one that can deliver him from the purgatory of Arkham Asylum and set his madness free once more. The very doctor tasked with treating him. As he gets his hooks deeper and deeper into the mind of his prey, Joker sets off a chain reaction of mayhem that will threaten to tear down not only Gotham City, but the soul of this idealistic man and his young family too. So, when this was announced and it was mentioned on our Discord, we kind of talked about this on the Discord. There's a lot of Joker stuff coming, and while I would love to see them take on some other villains, and I said this at the time when the announcement came out on the Discord, I was like, oh yeah, I would love to see other takes on other villains. Why not give other villains spotlight? Why are we getting so much Joker? And then I realized after I made those comments, oh yeah, that's right, there's a Joker movie coming out in October that I keep forgetting about, and obviously this is their way of, I guess, tying into the release of that by making sure that there's a bunch of Joker series that are available out on shelves. So I don't blame them for doing that rather than trying to do some sort of movie tie-in to something that's not part of any sort of real continuity. So I don't blame them for trying, to maximize the profit capabilities of the Joker when the movie comes out. But that being said, I still would like to see other things, and I'm hoping, despite the fact that we're getting all of these Joker series, to be clear, this is there's the Joker Harley Criminal Sanity series that's coming in. Then there's also the Harleen series that's starting in September. Then this one, and then on top of that, they also announced, which we didn't report on the site, but we'll report along with the solicitations, the Year of the Villain. One of the Year of the Villain specials, one-shots that are coming out in October, also happens to be featuring Joker and is going to be co-written by John Carpenter. So he's going to be giving his take on the Joker as well. So let's just say that, there's a lot of Joker stuff, but I'm just hoping that we have other Black Label stuff that we're going to be hearing about in the near future that's not just about the Joker, because while I appreciate the Joker just as much as the next Bat fan, I would like to see other rogues featured as well.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it's nice that it's not just retelling of the movie. At least we assume that it's not just going to be retelling, so it's going to be original. But bleh, I'm done with Joker. Even though he hasn't really had much to do lately, I'm done with Joker.
Yeah, I agree. I'm much more interested in Lemire's other project, The Question, even though that's clearly going to sell less based on the promotion and the amount of time devoted to it in the interview.
Yeah. No question about that. Yeah, so that was all the news we had from the past 2 weeks. It's been, like I said, it dries up. We got that slew of news in June. More news than we got in a 1 week's time frame, a really long time, and now it's been kind of dry, and we'll probably get a couple of things that we'll talk about on the next episode coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, but for now, that's all the news we've got. So we're going to jump straight into our comic reviews and start off with Batman.
Batman number 74, The Fall and the Fallen finale, written by Tom King, art by Mikel Janin. The story opens in the desert with Batman and his father, Thomas Wayne's Flashpoint Batman, fighting off an army of Ra's al Ghul's soldiers as they fight their way to a pit that can revive Bruce's long-dead mother, whose casket they have been dragging across the desert. As they fight, Thomas asks Bruce about the story he used to read him as a child, which was featured back in Batman number 57, called The Animals in the Pit. As they ride, Thomas remarks that Bruce was a shy and timid child, and they talk about how Bruce would cry for that story to be read, and how Thomas didn't know why he liked the story so much. Bruce and Thomas reach the pit and rappel down into it with a casket, along with one of Raish's captured soldiers, as Thomas explains that the pit allows someone to trade their life to revive another. As they lower the casket, Thomas speaks more about the story he would read, and how it brought comfort to his mother that Bruce could repeatedly hear such a horrible story and still dream of a better world. Thomas then explains that Bruce has been addicted to being Batman, and that he needed to be brought to a low point and broken in order to grow past it and get his life back. Bruce then explains that the reason he kept insisting for the same story is that he couldn't give up hope that each time it was read that there would be a happy ending. Batman then proceeds to strike his father, and the two fight as The Animal in the Pit is recited in the captions around them. As they battle, Batman throws Thomas through the casket, causing it to break and spill its contents, a bunch of rocks on the cave floor. Batman explains that he hid his mother's body as his father slept earlier. He didn't know if he could beat his father, so he planned to get him to the pit so he could at least hurt him enough so that they would never escape. As the two fight, Batman explains that he learned a long time ago that his parents were dead, but that he is still alive. The story ends with the next morning as a gloved hand crawls out of the pit. So, we have the ending of The Fall and the Fallen. This has been kind of an odd story arc. Dustin had a lot of analysis based on the fact that we know that it was changed last minute by Tom King. Let's start with the basic question. How do you feel that it ends leading into City of Bane with 75 this coming week?
How do I feel about how this ends and going into City of Bane? I feel like it kind of ends abruptly. Okay, I mean, I wish I could pretend and say I know, I'm hoping that 75 is going to go this, but I'll be honest, I already read 75, and it is just as confusing as you would probably expect it to be coming out of this story. I read 75, and my immediate reaction was, how does this connect to 74?
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, I don't want to go too much into 75, but basically the issues I have is this clearly sets it up as somebody gets out of the pit, but somebody's not getting out of the pit. Or at least that's what you would assume based off of that ending of only one glove emerging from the pit after this battle. So somebody is still in the pit. But the way 75 begins and takes place, both of them are out of the pit and both of them are on opposite sides of the world. So, yeah.
Maybe it's a really long pit and one of them came out one end and the other came out the other.
Maybe, yes.
Well, I've tried to stay decently ignorant of what City of Bane is. You know, I'm not looking at the solicits or things like that. So I would assume that City of Bane would have something. I mean, you know, not now that I'm spoiled, I don't know. I don't think this, but I would have thought that, you know, it whoever's getting out of the pit goes back to Gotham, and if it's Flashpoint, then he'd.
Well, trust me when I say reading 75, you will not know. And that is why it's confusing.
Well, yes, at this point, I mean, what is this 74? So, I mean, if we don't know Tom King by now, we're bad fans. So I cannot, in good conscience, believe that with one glove coming out of the pit, that I will fully understand what happened, who got out of the pit, and that to believe that the following issue will pick up where this one left off. I'd be a foolish Tom King fan if I believe that. So I all I know is that I have no idea because it's Tom King. I have no idea what he's going to do next.
I find that really interesting because I have also read number 75, and I wasn't confused because to me, this is the Batman and City of Bane number 1. Number 75 sets up, and I expected it to set up the new status quo, which is that Bane controls the city. The details of how that work, of course, are going to be surprising or interesting or creative or whatever. But I think that in terms of economy, you're always taught in creative writing and screenwriting especially to start the story as late as possible. So in terms of City of Bane, you want to start with City of Bane and give just enough information to say, well, this is how Bane got control of this or that. But I mean, honestly, we know that Bane has an enormous amount of power already, given that he has fooled everyone into thinking he's catatonic. He's not saying anything. But we know that he's actually directing the entirety of the underworld and a lot of the administration of Gotham already. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to see he's just decided to take advantage of Batman's absence to take over the entire city.
I'm not saying that part's confusing. I'm saying it's confusing how we get the end of this issue, which is a glove emerging from a pit, and it goes into a slightly future version of and when I say future version, I just mean it takes place a little bit into the future because we don't know how we got here, but we get back to Gotham City. The villains are basically running things in Gotham City, and it's the City of Bane. While I don't need the explanation of how it got there, what I would like the explanation of is why do we end on a cliffhanger of one hand emerging from the pit, yet Bruce Wayne appears in 75, nowhere near Gotham City, not in a pit, not even anywhere near this desert. And then Thomas Wayne is in Gotham City along with Bane. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just the connections. I understand how, it makes sense to like jump inside and then slowly tell out the story. That's fine. But I feel like that's happened a lot recently where we just jump to a certain point in the story and we don't know how we got there. We don't understand the explanation of where we came from or how we got here. And you're waiting for the explanation and it never comes. Or, I mean, like, we still don't know, like, you're going back to like issue number 50 with Bane having all of these people here. We still don't have any idea 25 issues or almost 25 issues later how exactly Thomas Wayne has come to be. Why exactly some of these other characters that are in cahoots with Bane are in cahoots. We don't have any idea why any of this is actually occurring. While sure, some of it could be explained in 75, I think that a year's time frame and 25 issues could just be a little too many issues to pass where we don't actually learn anything about why these characters are suddenly deciding to go with Bane. Sure, we've seen bits and pieces of Thomas saying, well, maybe he's doing this because it's the extreme reaction to Bruce not giving up being Batman or whatever. But at the same time, did he really need to see his son's entire emotional state crushed by what happened with Catwoman? Was that part of the plan? How does that help him not be Batman? I mean, like, I feel like we just keep presenting more and more questions. And while I understand that I'm not necessarily directly talking about this specific issue, this issue I didn't actually have a whole lot of issues with, other than I read it, I got to the end, I read the ending, I was like, okay, so who's the hand that emerges from the pit? That's obviously what they want you to ask when you get done reading the issue. And then well, then why would they not just show you who's emerging from the pit?
Well, to me, I think that we have two Batmen, and Tom King is very deliberately playing with this idea of Dark Mirror Thomas to Batman. And the thing is, they're both Batman. In number 69, Thomas uses all of Batman's catchphrases. You know, I am the Dark Knight, the Cape Crusader, the world's greatest detective. He thinks he's the real Batman. And so we know both of them get out of the pit. We knew that from solicits, that Thomas was going to be the Batman with Gotham Girl as his Robin. And of course we knew that Bruce wasn't going to die.
Well, we knew he wasn't going to die, but they also made a very big effort in the solicits to say that Bane had broken Batman. And now that's the explanation as to how this all happened and how he has taken over Gotham City. But really what happened was he broke Batman. They took him to do surgery. Then Thomas dragged him to the desert to bring back his dead wife. And then Bane took over Gotham City somehow. Meanwhile, every freaking other person who's normally in Gotham City has nothing to do with anything. And I understand they explained it somewhat with everyone just not believing that anything was happening. But how do you get it to the point of Bane is literally, he has full reign over the entire city and nobody else is taking notice?
Well, I'm sure that in terms of the Bat family, we are going to find out.
I hope to God we do, because if we don't, whoo-hoo.
Well, I mean, given the fact that number, I think it was 70, was it 70 or 71 where we had the whole Bat family and they all charge into Arkham and they find nothing. Obviously, Tom King's thinking about this. So I'm pretty darn sure that we're going to see what's up with the Bat family, both in Batman and in the tie-in titles. In terms of how Bane took over the city, I mean, that's kind of like Flashpoint Batman. I know that people are unsatisfied with the fact that Flashpoint Batman's here. I just look at the fact that Bane has persuaded Skeets to help him. And I'm like, well, Skeets can time travel and go to alternate universes and alternate timelines. I don't have a problem understanding that that's how Flashpoint Batman's here. I don't feel like I need it spelled out. That's just how I understand it to have happened.
You don't need it spelled out, but it's not like they're even giving you the letters to spell it out. I'm sorry, I just don't.
Skeets is here. We saw what Skeets could do.
Why does Bane have control of Skeets?
Because
Skeets has done evil several times.
The problem is, I feel like you guys are, well, not you guys, but just in general, there's too many dots being connected that Tom King would say, well, yeah, you're just supposed to do this yourself. And the thing is, like, while not everything has to be spelled out, I feel like there's some gaping holes here that need to get filled in, and not just, somehow connect the dots and do it yourself. I don't want to have a story where I have to connect all the freaking dots to understand these big moments and these big explanations of how things have occurred. Thomas Wayne showing up was a big deal. I still don't feel like we've really explored why he's here, other than he's pissed about Batman not giving up being or Bruce not giving up being Batman. But couldn't the wedding have potentially pushed him in a direction that could have changed that? Maybe. Who knows? We'll never know, because, of course, Thomas Wayne was already in cahoots and ruining the wedding in the first place. So, I don't know.
I mean, I agree. I made a large deal in my review of Batman 50 about how I think that not letting Batman be married was the least interesting of story choices Tom King could have made, but I'm still on board with it.
I'm on board for it too. I mean, like, I know I sound like a broken record and I constantly sound super negative on this arc. It's just because I feel like we keep getting these small, like, segments of a larger story, but I don't feel the connections between these smaller segments. I still don't understand the reason behind the entire nightmares, but I won't go into that because I've said that way too many times. I don't understand the entire reason of not explaining, like how Gotham Girl disappeared for like 50 something issues. And then when she comes back, she is completely different character than she was when we last saw her. And that was never explained. I just feel like there's too many things that haven't been explained because because everything is these weird segments. It almost feels like there's a different writer writing these different parts, and somebody behind the scenes is like, okay, let's figure out how we can connect them all together and explain it. And hopefully they'll do it themselves, because I'm not going to.
But do you think maybe, and this is kind of a cop-out answer, but there is so much that is unexplained, it might add too many issues or extend the story even longer to explain it all, which is silly.
Honestly, I would say that, but I've seen things like I've seen things wrapped up so easily with like just the most offhand comment from somebody, like just in a word bubble, that I know it's possible. So there's no reason you have to. It's just the problem is like ignoring characters for 50 something issues or 30 issues or whatever, and then coming back to them and they be completely different and not explaining why they're completely different. Taking a character who has a very specific purpose, who legitimate, like Thomas, what I'm referring to, Thomas Wayne here. Thomas Wayne like legitimately wants Bruce to have a better life because he doesn't want him to have a life like kind of what he's experienced, but in a different sense of, obviously he's not him and it's a different world. Him going from, son, I love you so much at the end of Flashpoint, to, son, you should really stop being Batman. It's the best thing for you, to, I'm going to team with this massive enemy and I'm just going to take you out now. Like, it's too much of a stretch for these characters without any sort of explanation. And now, of course, you see Thomas Wayne like literally walking through the desert with the dead body of his wife saying, I'm going to raise her from the dead because that's the next best thing. What? This is not the Thomas Wayne from Flashpoint. Like, Thomas Wayne from Flashpoint was a violent, sadistic character, but when it came to his son and his wife, it was a whole different story. Now it's just coming across as like he's out to do whatever, by whatever means necessary. He has to do what he needs to do. And his son, the fact that it's his son doesn't matter. He's okay just sitting by and watching his son get the crap beaten out of him by Bane. And that's okay because he didn't stop being Batman in this short amount of time that's passed since he first told him, hey, stop being Batman. I'm sorry. I just don't see that as like the correct characterization for Thomas Wayne. And the thing is, like, Gotham Girl going from this character who is being helped, the whole I Am Suicide thing happened because they needed to get Psycho Pirate so that they could help Gotham Girl so that she could get better. And then the next time we see her, she's back to her murderous ways of, I need to be exactly like my brother and I have to use my powers. I'm going to end up killing myself because of it. Like, what? How are we not explaining any of this? And I know that King didn't write the Gotham Girl story, but I'm sure he had some sort of input on it. I don't know. I know every time when you talk about Batman, I know this happens, and I know I keep ranting about it, and then I end up and give it the issue a higher rating, and everyone's like, what the heck is going on? It's really just like the issues themselves individually, they're enjoyable. And honestly, the art in these issues is amazing. But the thing is, like, the overall picture is what I keep looking at because that's my main focus, is the overall story. And honestly, when this is said and done, if you read this nonstop from issue number 1 to issue number 85, when it wraps up, or even on to with including the Batman Catwoman story, the Batman Catwoman series that's coming out, is it all going to even make sense? Or is there still going to be these massive holes that were never explained that we're just supposed to connect the dots? And the thing is, I'm sure the dots are going to be there. And I'm going to keep saying it because years ago, when they first taught, when it was after the first year that King was on the book, we interviewed him at New York Comic Con. We asked him some specific question about Gotham Girl, and he specifically said, oh, that was just supposed to, you as the reader were supposed to figure that part out. And I can't stand the idea that as a reader, we have to figure things out. Like, if you put it in this perspective, if this was a super popular storyline and somebody went to adapt it and they had these massive holes, you don't think that somebody would tear this apart if it was an animated film, if there was these massive holes that didn't get resolved?
I think they would leave the holes, and my argument for that is that look at The Dark Knight Rises. How in the world does Bruce get from the prison pit to Gotham in under a day without a cell phone, without any kind of way to contact any of his resources, with Wayne Enterprises?
I'm not trying to say that all movies are plot proof and they don't have
but
holes.
what I'm
Almost
saying is
every
that
movie has
we know
plot holes. I'm just saying, like,
this franchise already made a movie that did this. So I think that there's a certain amount of fragmentation that I think fans are becoming more used to accepting. And
I will never get used to it, and I will never accept it. And I will be here to be the one who constantly preaches, stop fragmenting your stories and expecting everybody to just connect the dots that you don't actually have the dots there for.
I really wish I could have been on the cast when the Batman RIP was happening, because I think that was way more fragmented than anything Tom King has done.
I would not disagree. I would not. And I know that back then it was a completely different story, but I think that I've read a lot more comics since RIP. And while I enjoyed the art in RIP and the overall story was a really interesting concept, I can acknowledge back, looking back, there is a lot of plot holes that don't necessarily make sense. And I know that a lot of times you just chalk it up to, well, it's Grant Morrison because that's what he does, which isn't, that's not like a fair assessment, because as a writer, in my opinion, you shouldn't be doing that. And like, if I was to get amnesia and wake up tomorrow and someone said, oh yeah, you review comics for a living, you need to start out with RIP, it'd probably be the exact same situation where I'd be like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense.
Amusingly, Tony Daniel did the art for RIP too, and we're
yes,
back to where we started.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of a segue, because you started talking about the pit. I think it's really funny that I brought up the Fable last episode, and it was such a huge part of this issue. How do you think that the Russian fable about the animals in the pit fits into the story now? I thought it was actually really it made my appreciation for that first issue grow a lot to have it repeated here in this context.
I thought it was really smart. It does show that he can connect different elements, which only proves my last point about why aren't we, connecting the dots when needed. I mean, like, to be fair, when the fable popped up in the previous issue during the KGB storyline, it was kind of like out of nowhere. I wasn't real sure exactly the reason they used it, but it worked and it was fine. And we drew comparisons to the fact that Thomas Wayne was reading it to Bruce, and it was fine. I mean, like, it was there, and it was like a way to format the issue with using an existing piece of literature. That was fine. Drawing back to that, however, is a cool way to bring back something you've referenced in the past and actually acknowledge that, this existed not only in the normal timeline, but also in the Flashpoint timeline too. They both read the book, and to see how different the interpretations of the story is from each of the perspective Batman's, it's really interesting. And I think that something like that is really a smart way for a writer to acknowledge your previous work, especially since that issue was like, over 10 issues ago. There's a smart way to bring it back, and I think it worked well.
Yeah, it was cool that, one, they're literally going down into a pit while they're talking about this pit story, which I don't know if it was if going to the pit triggered the thought in Thomas, or if it's something he'd always thought about. But it was kind of cool because, in the story, they're going to the church to pray, and then they're kind of dumped in this pit of hopelessness. And, way like a Lazarus pit is, I don't know, this pit in particular. There is a hopelessness to this pit because it's so far down. You have to exchange a life for a life. Like, at least one person is not coming out of this pit, if anyone at all, because it is so far down. So on a literal sense, it is interesting that, there's the parallel of the story and what they're actually doing, even though they don't seem to really acknowledge that they're in a pit with the possibility of not coming out, talking about a story about a pit where the animals didn't come out. Yeah, I agree with Dustin that it was very clever, and I just loved seeing the side of Bruce even as a kid, and I have to admit, I've done the same thing too. You watch the same movie over again, hoping maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe this time it'll be okay. I don't know if I've done it to this extent where, I wake up screaming and need to watch the movie again or read the book again. But it was cool seeing that, he comes from a place of hope, and that's intrinsic to his character, and that's one reason he's Batman, is there's always that hope that it can be better, that he can save the day.
That is a brilliant observation, Steph, and I think this ties directly to what Tom King is doing with this series, which is he's asking, can Batman be happy and still be Batman? And this story is from before his parents died. So there was a part of Bruce that would read a story of a tragedy, a story of some of the worst people can do to each other, and hope that they would be better. And what Catwoman said in issue 50 is that Batman is a machine that takes the pain of the world and turns it into hope. But I think that he's saying through this story that Catwoman was wrong. That ability to take pain and turn it into hope is not dependent on Batman being miserable. It's not dependent on the tragedy of his parents' death. And I think that points to hope for what Batman Catwoman is going to be and what the generational change will be. Because I think it's still happening. I think it's going to be good. And I think this is part of the foundation for that ending. So thank you for spurring that. That was brilliant.
Also, I mean, they say if an author brings something up 2 or 3 times, you really need to pay attention to it because it's super important. And so now this is second time, right? I guess you can kind of count the last.
It's the second explicit time for this. But, I mean, we saw the image of falling. I mean, there was that almost wordless issue where Batman in the nightmares was falling from the top of the building sewers. Like, this whole thing has been imagery of pits and falling, and now we're coming back up. And I'm very excited. So why don't we get to our ratings?
All right, so I'm going to give this one a total of 4 out of 5.
I liked the art, but it wasn't like, there wasn't any like panel that was like, wow, that's awesome. It was just very good art. I don't know. 3.5, I think, for me.
I'm going to say a 4.5 out of 5 for this issue. It hit a lot of good stuff for me.
All right. And then over on the site, Paul gave it 4 as well. So that's going to give the issue a total of 4 out of 5 batarangs. Let's move into our next issue, Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 1007, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Kyle Hotz. James Corrigan screams for the Spectre to show up. He threatens these followers who are holding him captive and threatens to kill them all. One of the followers tells him the connection between himself and the Spectre will be terminated. In the Batcave, Bruce re-examines the crime scene virtually with the use of holograms. He removes any GCPD member from the scene, examines the deceased's wounds, and checks the area for any unusual debris. Bruce feels that there is something wrong and shouts for the Spectre to reveal himself. The Spectre manifests and says it was always his intention to announce his presence. Bruce goes back to put his cowl on, but the Spectre insists that it is pointless. He is the spirit of God's vengeance. A mask is a trivial thing. Bruce asks why Corrigan is so special to him, and the Spectre shares that they are one and the same. In order to explain the situation, the Spectre allows Bruce to see his memories through the eyes of Corrigan. Corrigan had always wanted to be a police officer like the generations of Corrigans before him. Earning his detective shield was the proudest day of his life. He led many good cops to save the soul of New York. Along the way, he lost good and honorable friends. He pushed the ethical limits to stop crime. Unfortunately, all actions have consequences. One of the criminal organizations he tried to stop sent a few men to tie him up and throw him into a lake. While drowning, he pleaded for a second chance at life. He saw an intense light telling him he was not worthy of heaven, but not that unworthy to go to hell. He was bound to the Spectre and has been on the war against crime ever since. The Spectre shares that he is going to rejoin Corrigan by any means necessary. Bruce says he will help him find Corrigan only if the Spectre swears not to give in to his bloodlust. The Spectre says it is his nature, but insists only blood will be spilled, no deaths for tonight. Bruce shares that although the Spectre contaminated the crime scene, he was able to still find a small piece of fabric left in the alley. This fabric has a tip of a finger seared to it. Bruce has the back computer analyze the finger and discovers the fingerprint belongs to Rick Zoller. The Spectre takes Batman to a prison cell and confronts a man named Nigel Walker. He demands to know where Ray Ambrose is. They were previous associates that pulled several heists together. The Spectre threatens the man to tell Batman everything. After agreeing to their terms, Batman admits he never thought he would be the good cop. Batman and the Spectre goes to Ambrose's apartment and look for any clues. Batman looks at one of Ambrose's boots and finds a shard of wood. After analyzing it, he determines it is from Grace Church. Batman and the Spectre enter the church and hurriedly look for Corrigan. After finding him, Batman and the Spectre stop the cult from killing Corrigan. Batman throws a batarang at Corrigan's restraints and Corrigan enters the fight. A fire is spreading and they all need to leave before the fire consumes the church. All except one of the cult members escape the fire, and Batman tells the Spectre to honor his promise and save the life. After retrieving him, Batman thanks him for keeping his promise. Batman looks to Corrigan and says he needs to leave Gotham. Corrigan says he put in a transfer back to New York a few weeks ago, and it's only a matter of time before he returns. All right, so I don't have a lot to say. I know that the problem is
I still say this is just a rehash of The Brave and the Bold, but Tom King did it better.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't want to sit here and harp on because I feel like all I'm going to end up coming is the person who just complains about everything this episode. Even though, of course, the last issue I gave I gave Batman 4 out of 5, and everyone's like, but all I talked about was how much he despises Tom King's story. No. So here's the thing. This was fine. I mean, for a story that's taking place in Detective Comics, at least there was a lot of detective work. I can say that. I can honestly say that I'm still not a fan of this style of art. I will say it's not as bad as Kelly Jones, but it's very comparable. But ultimately, it comes down to at least this was only a 2-issue story arc, so we're not spending too much time, but it does feel just like a very quick story just to fill in the gap. And I'm not exactly sure why. As far as, to be fair, it really just feels like they needed an artist to do a 2-issue story arc because they needed someone to fill in so that before one of the previous artists comes back on, they just needed a 2-month break. I don't know. It just, I don't know. Overall, what did you guys think of the story arc?
Well, yeah, it was detective-y. It was kind of a shame that one of the detectives was the victim in the whole thing and didn't do any detectiving, but it was cool to see Batman the detective. And I really it's not that I dislike supernatural stories. My brain checks out. Start watching it and I go, I don't care. I don't care about magic. Oh, good. You snapped your fingers. You talked backwards and nothing's happened. Don't care. But this one at least kept me, I read it all the way through and it kept me engaged enough that I was not put off by the magic part of it. So that was, or the cult part of it. At least in this issue, the cult part of it was not prevalent enough that, my eyes glazed over. So it was a solid, decently told story with art that was appropriate for the type of story that it was. So, it didn't take me out of it too much, even though his ears are still so pointy and long. Yeah.
I already sort of said my thoughts. I think this was certainly not a poorly told story, but it just feels really disposable. Like, it's just not going to stick with me.
Isn't that okay sometimes, though? Because not every story has to be life-altering and changing your opinions on things and staying with you the rest of your life. Like, sometimes it's okay especially for it's ongoing, that's been around since, 1932 or whatever it was? Like,
39, but yes.
39.
But yes.
Like, some stories are just going to be, whatever.
I mean,
and that's perfectly fine, but those stories can still be interesting and
That's
not...
true.
Honestly, I think it comes down to, I don't think any of us are huge fans of the spiritual or the magical elements.
Don't get me wrong. I actually really like the Spectre, and I think Greg Rucka did some great things with him when he was Crispus Allen. I just don't think that anything presented here was really theologically careful, or it was just kind of gore for gore's sake and just like, rah, wrath of God, instead of, the deep questions of guilt and innocence that you get when someone like Christopher Priest or Greg Rucka really takes a look at what the implications of an entity like the Spectre are. So I think it was just really not living up to the potential it could be, while being, it's inoffensive. I just think I've seen this story done better with the Tom King one-shot, and also I've seen this character handled much better.
I would definitely agree. I don't know a lot about Spectre other than the few appearances he's had in the Batman universe, but I can honestly say that I was kind of taken aback by the fact that he was the Spectre is so all about just straight up murdering people. Because I don't remember that characterization, but I may just be remembering wrong. But I definitely don't remember in Gotham by Midnight or Batman Eternal the Spectre just emerging and just straight up killing people. But
I mean, he's definitely very dark, but I just think this wasn't super thoughtful.
Yeah. I'm also not exactly sure how the spirit of God would want, or the spirit of God's spirit of vengeance would be an entity that would just go around killing people. Like, it just seems like it's more like, I'm not sure how that would need to be associated with God. It just seems like somebody who's just trying to even the odds or even the count. But whatever. Anyway, as you can tell, we probably we didn't really like it, and I don't really want to spend too much time talking about something that wasn't exactly great, but wasn't exactly horrible either. I'm going to give this 2.5.
Yeah, a good solid 2.5.
2.5.
And over on the site, Tony gave it 2, so it's going to give Detective Comics a total of 2.5 out of 5 batarangs. That is all of our in-depth reviews. Let's jump over to the site for Greater Gotham. Starting off on July 3rd, main TBU books, Batgirl number 36. Batgirl has to fight her way out of the terrible trio's burning club as the story arc comes to a conclusion. This was reviewed by Paul. He gave it 3 out of 5. Harley Quinn number 63. Harley confronts the specter of death itself in another bizarre trial while Harley's mother gets more bad news. This is reviewed by David. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Batman Teenage, moving over to secondary TBU books, Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, number 3. The Turtles and Batman get more in tune with their true histories as both find their old friends and enemies. This is by Adele. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. Main DC Universe books, Adventures of the Super Sons, number 12. As the series comes to an end, Robin and Superboy finish off their current threats and encounter a new one. This is by H. Ham, and he gave it 1.5 out of 5. Deceased, number 3. The heroes take a moment and acknowledge their losses. This is by Tony. He gave it 4 out of 5. Justice League number 27. John continues his search for Lex while the rest of the league try and find the monitors. This was reviewed by Andy. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Secondary DC Universe books, The Green Lantern number 9. Bat Lantern, the Bruce Wayne from Earth 32, appears at the end of the issue. Lois Lane number 1, The Question, Renee Montoya appears in the issue. Superman Up in the Sky number 1, Batman appears briefly at the beginning of the issue. Jumping over to July 10th, we have main TBU books where he talked about Batman number 74, Batman and the Outsiders number 3. Batman tries to get the Outsiders to become more cohesive through a training exercise. Meanwhile, Ra's al Ghul tries to turn Sophia to the dark side through his own version of training. This is by Dill. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Batman Universe number 1. Batman crashes the Riddler's party trying to stop the theft of the Fabergé egg, but things are not quite what they seem. This is by David. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. Catwoman number 13. While Catwoman runs around Villa Hermosa looking for Aunt Linda, Raina Creel is one step ahead and uses her bargaining chip to get the relic. This is by Jessica. She gave it 3.5 out of 5. Detective Comics, we already talked about. Red Hood Outlaw number 36. A number of plot points are wrapped up as Red Hood is approached by Lex Luthor. This is by H. Ham. He gave it 2 out of 5. No secondary TBU books. Main DC Universe books. Event Leviathan number 2. Batman and Red Hood investigate the Leviathan attacks. This is by Ian. He gave it 3 out of 5. Young Justice number 7. The Gemworld Court Banishment sends the Young Justice team bouncing through the multiverse like a pinball. This is by Jessica. She gave it 4 out of 5. Secondary DC Universe books. Black Hammer, Justice League Hammer of Justice number 1. Batman appears as part of the team. Justice League Odyssey number 11. Azrael continues to appear as part of the team. Wonder Twins number 6. Batman appears as a member of the Justice League in the issue. And then TBU trades and hardcovers over the past 2 weeks include Batman Deluxe Edition Book 4 hardcover, Joker the 10th Anniversary Edition trade paperback. And those are the only 2 that released in the past 2 weeks. So quickly, out of the books that we've had over the past couple of weeks, Steph, which book would you like to suggest?
Oh, I was so demoralized and checked out with Super Sons that I didn't really want to read anything else. So that was my unhighlight is don't bother with Super Sons. I was so confused. I think the only other thing I read was Deceased was okay. It's a very middle of the road story. So although I guess Deceased was good. I don't know if I'd highlight it, but I did have a question about Red Hood. What's wrong with Lex Luthor? Why is he a caped ghost?
So Lex Luthor is currently he has a drone that looks like a hologram. And it's going and making offers to villains. It's part of the Year of the Villain crossover event that's currently happening. That was explained, what was it, like Justice League 24?
Oh, I'm not reading Justice League anymore. So that sounds
good. It was Justice League 24, but it's been a while since Lex Luthor took over this new look, I guess.
Wasn't it in the Year of the Villain 25-cent comic, though, that we saw it?
I think it happened there, but it was explained in 24.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think he sacrificed himself or whatever, however they worded it, and then they explained how it actually happened in the other issue. But anyway, Ian, suggestion.
Nothing like super exciting, but I would like to highlight Batman and the Outsiders. I think it's a really fun book. Art really good by Dexter Soy. Brian Hill doing a really strong job with the writing, and there's some really good moments with Duke and Cass, and I think Brian Hill is doing what I'd hoped, which is really bringing Duke to a better place as a character instead of being kind of really a cipher pulled by different writers. I think Brian Hill's going to give Duke an identity, and that's very much of the good. And I also kind of want to point out that Batman Universe is the Walmart comics that I used to be reviewing last year before DC decided to release them individually. So the art on those is by Nick Darrington, and it really reminds me of one of my favorite artists, Darwin Cook. And so at the very least, it's worth checking out. Maybe you might not want to buy it, but take a look at it in your comic store and see if it looks good.
Definitely. And my suggestion over the past 2 weeks is not specifically a Batman title. To be fair, some of these Batman titles have... let me just, we've got some time. Let me run through some of these. Backroll 36 kind of just ended very abruptly and wrapped up a lot of things, obviously because there's a new creator coming on the book. Cecil Castellucci is coming on the title with number 37. So Margaret Scott's kind of wrapped up a couple of her minor plot points. And yeah, not super thrilled with how everything just conveniently was wrapped up, and some of the stuff that was actually interesting is no longer going to be featured at all. Adventures of Super Sons. That book has gone downhill for I'd probably say like the last 4 or 5 issues.
Yeah.
But it ended on a really, really low point for me. Specifically, the fact that it honestly just feels like this was a story arc that somehow just decided to get expanded. Like maybe Super Sons originally this was just meant to be the next story arc in Super Sons. They announced they were canceling the book. They decided to say, wait, we're actually going to do a Super Sons maxi series, and that'll be coming out in a couple months. And then he decided to extend the story arc to last 12 issues because it just feels like one really long, unnecessarily long story. And it really didn't wrap up in like a meaningful way that made this entire series anything. I mean, like, to be fair, like Steph pointed out earlier, not everything has to have meaning and longevity and all of that. But when you have a maxi series and you say we're doing a maxi series for a group of characters, you would assume that there's a purpose behind that, not just here's an adventure that you can watch these two characters partake in.
Well, I would enjoy that though. Like if it's Damien and John, I would read pretty much anything.
Well, but
this was trash.
Well, it was at the end. I mean, like,
yeah.
it had its moments in the beginning, but it just got towards the end where it just felt like, oh, what planet are we going to now?
Ugh.
What threat are we going to? Oh, Rex Luthor, he's back. Awesome. I didn't see that coming for the 4th time in this story arc. So, I mean, like, I don't know. I just feel like it was longer than it needed to be. I mean, it could have been fine if maybe it was a 6-issue miniseries rather than a 12-issue maxi series, but it just didn't work out like in a way that like was enjoyable. So I mean, like, that was a downfall. Red Hood Outlaw. Oh boy. This is just like Batgirl in the sense of they wrapped up all kinds of things very conveniently in a nice little bow. But even more so than they did in Batgirl, because there were some massive things that just been introduced like just a couple issues ago that suddenly were wrapped up very, very quickly. And obviously Red Hood is going to have a major role in Year of the Villain. And he's also going to be over in Event Leviathan, but it's just some of this stuff, the way they're wrapping things up is just kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what was the point of like reading all of these issues that are leading up to these big things? And then it's just, nope, it's all done. Everything's done. It's all done. Don't look here now. Move on. I mean, like, honestly, if I'm going to look at any of the issues that actually came out, and then the other problem is like Event Leviathan and Deceased, while I feel like they're good series, both of these kind of just were like treading water this month. I don't really feel like either one of them was really moving the story super forward. And that's unfortunate as well. And the same thing with Batman Teenage Ninja Turtles. It was the same thing. It just feels like we're treading water with some of these titles where I understand that not every issue a ton of stuff can happen, but let's be honest, there's plenty of series that every issue stuff happens. And this is just, it feels like there's too much exposition to explain other things going on or explain to somebody who doesn't, who's not keeping up with, which I understand that they need to do that, but I think they're just doing a little bit too much of it. But as far as a suggestion of a book, I do agree. Batman and the Outsider was really good. I can see that there was some shoehorning of the Year of the Villain stuff towards the end, which it was fine. It didn't like interrupt the story in any way like some of the other ones seem to be doing. But the one book that actually came out in the past 2 weeks that I read was actually outside of the Bat Family stuff, which, as most of you know, I don't have a tendency to read a lot of stuff that's not part of the Bat Family releases just because I just don't have time. But I did happen to read Lois Lane #1, and I got to say, I enjoyed that issue a lot. I thought it was very, very well written. The art is very good. It was an enjoyable comic that I didn't have really any sort of expectations for. I mean, to be honest, Lois Lane's not a superhero. She is a supporting character to a superhero in most situations. And I like that they're giving her a focus and really making her own character who can really do something really interesting. Because, let's be honest, political thriller. Okay, well, I'll be honest. I like political thrillers, and that's what this feels like it's going to like turn into. So I enjoyed that. So I would suggest that one. So All right. So with that being said, that is all of our in-depth or all of Greater Gotham. If I mentioned a rating for the issues, then we do have reviews of all of those issues over on the site every single week. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, there are reviews on the site. Wednesday is all the Batman specific titles. Thursday is all of the allies and villains within the Batman universe. And then on Friday is all of our DC Universe titles. So be sure to check out all of those reviews every single week over on the site, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or join our Discord, because we also post on all of our social media when we do have new reviews posted. That being said, there's also another segment of Batman Through the Years. This one dives into 1940, and as you're listening to this, 1941 should be out as well. So check out those. Those are coming out on Monday mornings, so you can check out those. Before we get into our listener questions, I want to quickly thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you, Colt, Donald, Robert, Cody, Austin, Captain America, Brendan, Irwin, Ian, Arturo, Jay Dutton, Real No Deuces, and Stanton's Grave. We greatly appreciate all of your support, as well as all the support that we get at the lower levels as well. A couple people have dropped off over the past couple of months, but then there's been some new people who have come on board. So we greatly appreciate all the support that we are getting. And as I've said multiple times, and I'm going to continue to say it, if you have not joined our Discord, please do join our Discord, because all of the contests that we previously had over on Patreon are now over on our Discord, held exclusively over there because of some terms and conditions that changed over at Patreon. So if you are, in fact, any Patreon supporter and you have not joined our Discord, I encourage you to do so, because we hold a contest every single week, or not every single week, every single episode that we release. So twice a month we have a new contest. The last contest that we just held for the previous episode was a group of children's DC superhero books, a small collection of those, and the winner, by the time this episode releases, will be announced, and then we'll have a new package which will be coming out, which, let's see, what do I have this time around? It's going to be, I don't know, I have something, I just can't see it from where I'm at. So it'll be posted onto the Discord, and all you need to do is just join the Discord. Anybody can enter, even if you're not a Patreon supporter, and enter it for a chance to win the prize for this time around. And Patreon supporters get an extra entry into the sweepstakes. So I greatly encourage you to join the Discord to be a part of those sweepstakes, to potentially win a prize. And then everybody else also join the Discord, because you can win a prize too just by joining the Discord. And we've had a lot of people really join recently on the Discord, and there's been a lot of conversations going on. There's always conversations going on every Wednesday, after new comics release. So be sure to check it out. All right, so with that, we're going to jump over to our listener questions.
Boy, did you get a wrong number. Leave your message at the sound of the shriek. No, please, don't!
We have one specific question before we get into a bunch of Monkey Watch stuff. So the first comment and only comment comes from Mattman via Discord.
Mattman says, great episode. I always get nervous when there isn't a lot of news to report, but that discussion was great. I have a question based on the episode. If Bruce's parents come back and Bruce does step down from Batman, do you think we could see a Batman Beyond type Bruce? Do you think Dick could take over the mantle once he's Dick again? What would that mean for Jason or Tim or Damian? I would love a badass Jason Todd Batman. I know I would never get it, just fantasy booking. But my question, I guess, would Bruce take a more Oracle role? Also, I love Joelle Jones's art. Lady Killer was awesome, and I love her run on Batman. I would love to see her do a miniseries with the 1950s Batman. I know timeline restrictions and such.
Okay, so thanks for the compliment on the last episode. The obviously Bruce's parents are not coming back. If Thomas Wayne somehow mysteriously goes out in the desert and finds the body that was hidden after only one person emerges from the pit, and then they split up and are on opposite sides of the globe, and the next okay. Is it possible that Bruce could take like more of a mentor role where he stays inside the Batcave? I'm not going to say this is not possible. I think that I'm not saying that it would be possible like right this second, but I think there's a point in time where it's entirely possible that Batman could take a back seat. The requirement, of course, would be that he needs to be way more interconnected with the Bat family, which we're not currently seeing in Tom King's run. While we are seeing connections to the Bat family, I don't feel like we're seeing a massive connection where like the Bat family is constantly like this is not like Detective Comics at the beginning of Rebirth, where we have multiple members of the Bat family interacting with Batman and each other on a normal basis. But if we did get to the level of the Bat family legitimately all being in Gotham City, we have Nightwing. We have Dick Grayson actually being Nightwing in Gotham City or even in Bloodhaven because they're close and he just pops in Gotham from time to time. And you brought back Tim and you brought back Damian because obviously they're on the Teen Titans and Young Justice right now. Batgirl was a little bit more involved in things and not just on the frills of the stuff. Red Hood was brought back more in the fold. I think that like legitimately Bruce could do like a really cool mentor role of having the Bat family take care of things every single night. And he doesn't need to be out on patrol. He could just be like the oracle of the group. Do I see it happening anytime in the near future? The only way I could see this happening is if he legitimately does get married and he decides he just wants to take a step back from doing as much as he is doing. Maybe because of everything that happens with City of Bane, he gets pushed to his brink where he's like trying to do everything himself, and he comes back to realize he really does need to lean on his allies and the other people who are operating within Gotham City and the Bat family and things like that. I think that is entirely possible. Maybe he does try to experience happiness if the wedding actually goes through and says, maybe I don't need to be out on patrol every single night. Maybe I can rely on some of these other people that I have put so much trust in. And we see a different side of Bruce Wayne. That's the only way I could see that happening. I honestly think that if Thomas somehow found Martha's body and they were together, I don't see Bruce stepping down. Obviously, 73 was setting up something very specific that did not actually play out in 74. But honestly, I feel like that would be the only way, and I think it could be entirely possible. But it would require him to have some sort of like huge breakdown because of something like City of Bane, which is coming, and then maybe get to the point where he can actually experience some happiness, and he realizes, which would be also a change of his character, that he doesn't have to be the failsafe for every single situation. So
I just wanted to comment that I think that a Joelle Jones 1950s Batman Black Label title would be pretty cool, and despite the overabundance of Batman Black Label titles, I think that would be much more interesting than most of what they're doing right now.
Would you want it to be campy or?
Well, I'm thinking he mentioned Lady Killer, so I was thinking more of a gritty, but also that 1950s aspect.
I would like, something like that.
I mean, if we want campy, we've got the Batman 66.
I know. Wasn't there was a Batman where he was like fighting Nazis, I think. I don't remember what it was. You look that one up, but there was one where he and Catwoman were actually like in World War II with the technology of the time. It was okay. Catwoman was a bit of a skank.
Wow.
I'd love to see Jason Todd as Batman because he was for 5 minutes during Battle of the Cowl, but they didn't really know what to do with him. Well, they don't know what to do with him now.
No one considers that legitimate, though.
Right. But I think as he is now, it would be interesting. I mean, because Dick is busy, not being Dick.
I think I just want to put my plug in here for Donovan and other Cascade fans that I think Cass would be a great heir to the Bat. I'm not a fan of the fans who say she should be Batman, but I think the Bat, I think she'd be awesome as it.
All right, so that is all of our questions. But what happened was, basically, I knew this episode was going to be rather short because of the lack of news and the fact that I knew I wasn't going to have a lot to say about Detective Comics. And in general, we didn't have a lot of listener questions. So I posed a question out to our listeners on Discord and said, hey, we've got time for Monkey Watch. Have you ever wondered something about us, or do you have any additional questions for the cast? And boy, oh boy, everyone did not disappoint. We got a slew of questions, and some of these are they're going to take a little bit of time. I'll say that. Monkey Watch 2017. So basically, what's going to happen is I'm looking at the clock, and we've got just under an hour to hit our 2-hour mark. Obviously, we don't have to go to 2 hours, but I don't really want to particularly go over 2 hours at this point. But there's a lot of questions here. I imagine we could probably hit every single one of these. So I'm going to read the question, and then we'll just, if you've got something to say, well, actually, there's a couple of these I imagine everyone could say something about at least. A couple of these, I'm not sure everyone will have something to say, but we'll just go Steph, Ian, and then myself answering the questions, and then we'll go from there. So first question comes from Mattman. He says, what are your views on pro wrestling? And then his follow-up was, what do you guys think about it? Do you watch it? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
I have very little interest in it. Gosh, a few months ago, I couldn't have told you anything other than The Rock comes from there, and the dude from Guardians of the Galaxy was a wrestler. That's about all I knew. Oh, and I knew why it was called WWE instead of, or why it changed from WWF to WWE. So I knew that was the extent of my knowledge. But I have since adopted a 17-year-old who's now 18, and he has taught me so much about wrestling that I never wanted to know. So I'm glad it exists. I'm glad he loves it, and there's a culture I don't understand out there that loves it, and good for you guys, but I am not interested.
I have to admit that I am pretty much in the same boat as Steph, but I'm even less interested in all sports, so I just don't really have a comment on pro wrestling. I think I have friends who are, so I think it's great, but it's sort of a closed book to me.
So I'm the complete opposite of my friends. And it's interesting this comes up because, well, a couple of things. One, I know for a fact that I'm not the only person on our Discord who likes wrestling. I believe Admiral Wright also watches wrestling, because I remember back in April when WrestleMania was on, or some other pay-per-view, or maybe it was Royal Rumble, I don't know, some pay-per-view, I randomly made some comment, or he made some comment, and we were chatting about it for a brief amount of time. Yes, I've actually watched wrestling for 20 years. It's thinking about how long it's actually been, it's kind of nuts. Now, I started watching in right when the Monday Night Wars were kind of over. SmackDown had started up. I started watching SmackDown right around the time that it debuted, when The Rock was real big and Stone Cold Steve Austin was around, and Kurt Angle and The Undertaker and Kane. Those were the big names at the time. I watched it pretty regularly for a really long time. The only catch was that I didn't have cable, so I couldn't watch Raw. I just watched SmackDown because it was on network. SmackDown was on network television. When I got into high school, I found other friends who also watched wrestling, and some friends actually had the money to pay for the pay-per-views, so I was able to see some of the pay-per-views, as much as the WWE WCW invasion angle was not very good in the large sense. At the time when I watched it, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I know that those of you out there who have no idea what I'm talking about, this is going to just go over your head, but I apologize. But I then went into, when I joined the military, I had cable television. I continued to watch the weekly shows and just keep up to date with stuff online. Eventually, I got out of the military and I came back up to the Chicagoland area where I currently live. Still watched it. Still been watching it for years. When they introduced the WWE Network, I subscribed for a good chunk of time and was watching pay-per-views pretty regularly because they were so cheap at that point. And then there were a couple of years ago, I want to say within 2 years ago, I stopped. I just stopped. Not stopped completely. I still would watch Raw and SmackDown, but the pay-per-views just weren't that interesting because of all of the ridiculous bookings that they were doing, where you see like multiple matches, multiple months in a row of the same exact thing. It just got really bad and really boring. So I stopped watching it. I continue to watch WrestleMania and Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is by far my favorite idea of a pay-per-view, mostly because you never know who's going to come out, and that's really cool. And I still watch WrestleMania, so I renewed the subscription for the network after that came, or for both of those pay-per-views. And then earlier, and I keep up to date with a lot of wrestling news in general online in my free time, which doesn't really exist, but I still manage to sift through one specific website that is pretty good about keeping up to date with the news. But anyway, about 6 months ago when AEW started to get, was announced and got real big, I started paying attention to that stuff. And I don't know what it was, but I don't know if it was the compounding of the fact that there was another company that was going to be emerging who could potentially rival WWE, down the road. I don't know what it was, but I just started to feel like Raw and SmackDown were getting really, really boring and not a lot of stuff was happening. And while I appreciated that they took a risk on like somebody like Kofi Kingston and gave him the chance to be champion, and there's a lot of other people who have suddenly started to get a little bit of a push, I feel like it was almost like a little too late, too late situation. And honestly, over the past couple months, I haven't really been watching Raw and SmackDown that much. I tend to just read about what happened on the episodes. So I'm kind of at a low point right now. I'm not really digging what's going on, and I'm hoping that maybe AEW could be something interesting, but honestly, there's no guarantees over there either. So that's a long-winded way to say I've been watching for a long time, and now you know a little bit more about me. So, all right. So our next question comes from Tony, who says, "What's the most controversial film or TV series finale of all time?"
Well, of all time is just a lot of material, but
let's not stick with the all of all time. Let's just, if you have a TV series finale that you're like, wow, that was really bad, or that could have went way differently, or you have a film franchise that had the final film in the franchise where it just was like, just went in a completely different direction. Right. Any of those, and you can have more than one.
So the last season of X-Files was a bit of a dumpster fire. When David Duchovny left,
about the one in the 90s, or are we talking about the one?
No, sorry. Yeah, I haven't watched any of the new stuff. I'm talking about like season 9. Season 9 was a dumpster fire. Season 8 was okay, even though Mulder left. Like, I still think they did a decent amount of good stories, but I gave up on season 9. I think I skipped to the finale, and then I was happy that it was over. So, like, I can't. It's like watching your child make really bad choices and become a homeless hobo, and you can't do anything to help them. It was just awful. But the two I have written down are, because when I heard controversial, I guess I thought like things that either made me angry or like were a commentary on the world. And so the first one was Cowboy Bebop. Spoiler if you haven't watched a 19-year-old anime. It's a great story, wonderful series. And then it ends with the main character getting shot, and then they pan away, and you never find out if he lives or dies. And I have not forgiven that show for hurting my soul like that, because you never find out if Spike makes it. And it's like, what? That's how it ends? It's terrible. And then for a movie, I came up with, and this is not my jam, but I watched Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Spoiler if you haven't seen a 50-year-old movie. But it was a decent, zombie movie. I think it's one of the first zombie movie of all time. And the protagonist in this 1968 movie was a non-tropey, very educated black guy who survives all the zombies. And then he goes out to get help, and he gets shot in the head by the southern white cops who are out zombie hunting, and they're just having a conversation, and they shoot him in the head, and they don't even blink, and they keep going. And that was like a very interesting ending to a zombie movie. And I thought it was fairly controversial, especially at the time. It would have definitely raised some eyebrows and sparked conversation. So those were my 3.
I, off the top of my head, The one that sort of hit most for me was How I Met Your Mother. I didn't watch the show religiously, but I watched it on and on for the entire run. And the final season I was really enjoying until the last episode, and then it just sort of poisoned a lot of the show before that. And I've read all the arguments about how it was set up and it's the creator's original vision, and I just think that it's a betrayal of the things they did in the last 2 seasons before that. And I think there's a reason it's not as well remembered as even something that's fairly controversial, not for its ending, but just for its content today, Friends. Friends is still beloved, even though you could never make that show right now. I guess another thing that occurred to me was the Sherlock. I used to be a fan in the first couple of seasons, but I think most people think the last couple of seasons are just dreadful.
They weren't dreadful.
They were really bad. So those are the two that I think go on. I can go on literally for hours on Sherlock Holmes, so I don't want to go too far into that.
Forgot about Sherlock.
All right, so here's the thing. I don't tend to watch a lot of television. Okay, I used to watch a lot of television as it aired, and now more recently I've gotten to the point where I am straying away from shows, watching on like a normal basis. And honestly, I say this, like I started watching a lot more shows like on Netflix and things like that as like a complete series. Years ago, this all started because I think I watched Breaking Bad all the way through in like a very short amount of time. And I was like, wow, that was so good. And it was such a great story and it played out very well. And then I started looking into other series that I could watch. And I've binged a bunch of different series over the years that have had multiple seasons, like tons of episodes. And just actually finished like a week ago from the time we were recording this, I finished The Office, the entire Office series, because I've seen the episodes here or there, but I've never actually seen it all the way through. So I watched all 9 seasons of The Office and over like a 2-month time frame, and it was good stuff. But it was like the one thing that's really interesting when you watch a series all the way through is you can see like the ups and downs of like when they had issues with the series and things like that, and you can clearly see, wow, they didn't know what they were doing. They were really struggling here. But thinking of shows that I've watched like on like the majority of, one that comes to mind immediately because it was probably one of the few shows that I watched a bunch when I was younger, and I remember everybody talking about it when it happened, was the Seinfeld finale. I didn't watch Seinfeld like, some sort of like person who would watch all of it all the time. But the thing is, like, it was on, my parents watched it. I'd watch it sometimes with them. They were constantly running reruns all over the place for the series. And it wasn't a show that you had to really watch from the beginning to the end to really understand what was going on. Similar to the way The Office is, but The Office does have a little bit more overarching stories with a lot of the different characters. But Seinfeld, the way it ended, it was. I know a lot of people talked about it like, well, this is how they end it. And honestly, I don't really find it that controversial in the sense of like, how do you end a show that literally has a bunch of people who are just in most situations really bad people? So that's the way you have it. You end with them all in jail, I guess. But one of the shows that I had an issue with when it aired, because I actually watched it from the very beginning and the end. Well, 2 shows. Mad Men. I hated the way that series ended. The first couple seasons of Mad Men were really good, and the last couple seasons, I just felt like they didn't know where to go, what to do, and it just didn't go anywhere. And then to have John Hamm's Don Draper go off into, live at peace on the West Coast and just give up everything, it just didn't seem like the way to end a series. So I really didn't like that one. But the other one that I really am annoyed by also is Dexter. Dexter was a great series, and it felt like they were going in a very specific direction. He was gone, and then at the last moment, they show that he's alive, and it's like they couldn't just let it be and leave it alone. No, he's still alive and he's out there, but he's making everyone else believe he's dead, which I just felt like was the wrong move. So those would be my two. As far as movies go, I honestly can't think of a movie franchise that has. The problem is when I think of movie franchises, of course, I can't think of any that have actually ended, because most of the franchises that immediately come to mind are ones that are still producing new movies. So I'll stay away from the movies for now.
Watchmen made you angry.
Watchmen did make me angry, but not.
Because I think that's controversial. Like the fact that they deviated from the comic book ending, and fans are kind of split on whether that was a good thing or not.
Yeah, so it's one of two sides. Okay, so to be fair, I never read Watchmen up until right before the movie came out. I knew the movie was coming out. I was really hyped to see it. I wanted to see it, and I was like, well, I want to know what the source material is first. So I got the graphic novel. I read it all the way through, thought it was an amazing thing. Did think that the squid at the end of the issue was kind of like off the wall and very weird to randomly end with. But I was just like, okay, that's just the way it ended. Whatever. And it could be chalked up to a variety of different explanations, but I just was like, okay, I'll accept it because that's what it is. When I saw the actual movie and saw that they did not go for the squid, I was like, I don't understand why they deviated. So much of this film took like straight shots from the panels to create shots for the film, and then they deviate and change it to be something that's not the squid. As ridiculous as that stupid squid was at the end of the story, why did they not do the squid? Just go for, like if you're doing this direct adaptation, why change it just because you think it serves better a different way? So like, I was pissed, but at the same time, I understood that the squid was kind of a weird thing to begin with. So like, I don't know. It's more of like I was on the fence, and I will say that when I left, the first thing I said to my wife, who also I made her read the graphic novel right before we went and saw the movie too. I was like, you got to read this. It's really good. And she thought it was really good too, but she questioned the squid too. And then when we saw the film, the first thing I said was, why didn't they have the squid? It's so weird that they didn't have it. And she's like, it is weird, but the squid was weird too. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So, but yeah. All right. So next question comes from Palo Tigrin, and he says, what does vacation look like to you?
I'm so boring. I said, not cooking, not doing dishes, going to Seattle where I can actually breathe the air. I live in Texas. The humidity here is a crime against humanity. And so Washington, you can breathe the air and the sun can come in. I'll stay with my parents and the sun will just shine in through the window. And if I feel like it, I'll go canoeing or something, or just go look at the water and enjoy the smelly beaches of the Puget Sound and just have a wonderful time. And then I told my husband about this. He's like, oh, I would totally go on a European trip with you. I was like, oh, right, that too. Yes. Wonderful European vacation. That would also be awesome.
I think I might be even more boring. And I know Dustin's going to, again, just burn us out of the water with all his parks and stuff. I like going to a quiet place, either in the mountains or in the forests with a cabin or a timeshare. And I do like to cook, probably because I don't cook normally. So it's sort of, that is a treat for me. I've done food management for group vacations for about 5 to 10 other guys and myself. And we went out to the mountains and we hiked and I cooked and I read and I marathon TV shows. And that was my vacation. I am super boring. I apologize.
So, my vacations, what a vacation actually looks like to me compared to what I would, if I imagined a vacation in my mind, is two completely different things. So typically, up until 2016, I hadn't been on vacation in probably about 10 years. And it wasn't for any specific reason. I had the opportunities to go on vacation. I just chose not to. My wife really likes traveling. But whenever she would, before we had kids, it was more of I didn't particularly I couldn't get out of work to go. So she would go with either a friend or family or whatever. and it just didn't work out. And then we had kids, and then of course some of the places that she was going, you don't bring kids with, so it was more of I still can't figure out how to get out of work, and now we've got kids, so I just become the babysitter for the kids. But just recently, now we've gotten to a point where my kids are a little bit older. We have family who can watch the kids for longer periods of time. And if you asked me prior to 2016 what my ideal vacation would be, it would be going to a forest type area, sleeping in a cabin, but still having like all the amenities that you would typically have. So I could still get online and read articles. I could still watch TV or, watch Netflix or whatever, and enjoy my time, but like breathe in that fresh air that you only get when you're away from the big city. Because while I don't live specifically in Chicago, I live in the suburbs around Chicago. It is a completely different type of air when you go to some place that's not in a metropolitan area, even the suburbs. So I'm not a hiker or anything, or a biker or anything like that I do typical stuff outside. So it's not like I'm going to the forest so that I can go hiking or anything like that. But my dream vacation is to actually go to Washington and like stay at some place along the coast or do an Alaskan cruise. That's on our list of stuff that my wife and I are planning on doing. And we actually thought about doing an Alaskan cruise, and it just didn't work out this year, just because of time and stuff. But then in 2016, I went to Disney World for the very first time, and then everything went to crap, because now every year I'm going to Disney World or one of the Disney parks or something almost twice a year. And that's now, I'll be honest. Okay. I went to a theme park that we had here in Chicago called Six Flags Great America when I was a kid, every single summer, just once a summer. And I had fun. I loved the rides and everything. But when you go to a place like Disney World, when I was a kid, I went to Disneyland once when I was like 7, I think, years old or 9 years old or something like that. And it was fun, but I don't really remember a whole lot about it because you don't pay attention to the details. But as an adult, you go to a Disney park and all you see is the massive amount of work that they put into the theming and, the connections and the little Easter eggs that are hidden all over the place. There's so many little details that you can't comprehend as a child that are there for adults. And then you put on the fact that you go to Walt Disney World and they have a gazillion restaurants. They have all kinds of different resorts you can stay at. Even if you don't stay at a resort on the actual property of Walt Disney World, there's like a gazillion food options to choose from. There's so many different options as far as entertainment and rides and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's what we do now. So last year I took my wife and my oldest son and my daughter, and we went. And in the spring, and then in the fall, I went with just my wife, and it was like the first time we actually went anywhere for a long period of time out of state, just the two of us, and that was really fun. And now it was so much fun that we're doing it again this year. But this year we took my oldest son and my daughter and my wife, and we went to Disneyland in the spring, and then my wife and I are going back to Disney World in September. And that is what we do. And now, of course, now that I've got this, I guess, desire to get out more often, my wife is constantly trying to figure out other ways. So we've been doing a lot more of like weekend trips and things like that. We have some friends that we go up to Michigan and Wisconsin with, just to do like wine tours, which I don't drink wine, but I drink cider. So there's cider tours that you can go on to and stuff like that. So that's what my vacations look like now. But if jobs were not a concern, money was not a concern, honestly, I would love to live in Washington. The idea of living in Washington, I love the idea of it being overcast and rainy and, getting that nice breeze off the ocean. That's what I would love. But yeah,
it's not overrated. It's wonderful.
Yeah. My wife, on the other hand, is not somebody who would like that, but she would be the one who wants to live where it's like super warm, like Florida. And I don't ever, as much as I would love to be very close to Disney World so I could go there more often, there's no way in heck I'd ever live in Florida. There's no way. All right. Next question comes from Adele, and he says, list all the places each of you have traveled outside of the U.S. and tell us your most memorable story that resulted from any of those places.
Oh, my word. So I kind of cheat because I grew up outside of the U.S. I'm actually a Canadian, half Canadian, born in Canada. Grew up in Austria, and the places that I visited while I lived there were Hungary, Romania, probably the Czech Republic, but I don't remember, so maybe I shouldn't count that. Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Great Britain, Scotland. I think I might have been sick for that trip, though, so that sucked. Probably a bunch of other places, too. Never been to Mexico. I live in flippin' Texas, and I've never been to Mexico. And the most memorable memory is I went on a trip with my dad without the rest of my family to Romania, which meant two border crossings from Austria to Hungary and then from Hungary to Romania. We get to the Austrian border crossing, and the dude is calling out all the names he has passports for, and he says, Elizabeth? I was like, that's not my name. It's not my sister's name either. It's my sister's middle name. So it turned out my dad had grabbed the wrong passport. And so I had to somehow look like a 2-year younger blonde girl to cross 2 former Soviet Union country borders. So that was exciting. But they didn't catch. Apparently, border security was not what it should have been. This was pre 9/11. So they didn't care. And they just let me through. And then another time I got into Spain sleeping in a trunk of a car. But it was a hatchback, so it wasn't like it was shut on me. The car was so full that it wasn't a room for all the kids. So one of the kids had to sleep on the luggage at any given time. And so I crossed the Spanish border sleeping in the trunk, which I like to think about. So that's mine.
So I am just about as boring as you'd expect. I have been out of the country once in 2001, 1 month before 9/11. I stayed in France for 2 weeks and then England for 2 weeks.
Ooh.
I think we did cross over into Switzerland for a day. And in England, we went to the North Countries for a little bit and then spent most of the time in London. Not a lot of memorable stuff. I mean, I went hiking in the Swiss Alps, which was fantastic. It was the first mountains I ever remember seeing. I nearly got into a fist fight at the top of the Eiffel Tower with someone because they cut in line in front of me. I don't know. I got to go visit 221B Baker Street before it went completely nuts with the Sherlock craze, which I would prefer because I'm a fan of the Jeremy Brett TV series, and that was the big thing back then. But yeah, I mean, that's the only time I've been out of the country. I had a good time, but I'm not a traveler, so while I would like to go back to England and see some of the countryside and the great stately manors, and I'd love to go see Prince Edward Island or Anne of Green Gables, and I'd love to go to the south of Italy because it's beautiful. I probably won't for several years.
So I haven't been to a ton of places outside of the country. I've been to Australia. I traveled all the way up and down the Gold Coast of Australia, and then I've been to Germany and Kuwait and Iraq, which are obviously all connected because of my time in the military. But and oddly enough, I've never been to Mexico or Canada. Canada is on my list of also places to go at some point. Mexico is hot. I mean, I'm sure I'll go at some point, but it's hot, and I'd rather be someplace that's not hot. And there's lots of places I'd love to go in Europe and Europe and Asia. I'd love to go to Japan. That's like one of my places that I really want to go, is to go to Tokyo and spend like more than a week in Japan to go up and down and see different things. There's lots of places in Europe too that I'd love to go. But probably my favorite memory though is when I went to Australia. I went as they call it a student ambassador, but it's not like an exchange student. It's just like a program to experience. So I was not with my parents or anything like that. I was just with this group of kids that were all my age. And I think I was 13 when I went. And it was really like I had gone to summer camps and things like that, but this obviously summer camps are, an hour or two away from your parents' house, not like, the other side of the world. So this was really my first experience of going away from my parents. And it was also the first time I had been gone for, 3 weeks. Most of the situations I was just gone for a day or not a day, a week or so. So it was a cool situation, but it was really cool because it was just like there was obviously chaperones that were part of this organization that I went with, but for the most part, it was like a ton of kids that were just my age that were experiencing this stuff with me. And my favorite memory of that entire trip was there was a point in time where there was a town that we stopped at that was along the coast, and there was the equivalent of like a Lions Club or the Knights of Columbus, like fraternal organization that was hosting our group they were having a dinner, and during the day they had us all like link up with a family and then go spend the day with the family to see how they do their things. And I was with this one family, but the husband and the wife had to go to work. So I actually stayed with their neighbor who was working, who was watching somebody, I don't know, not watching, but because they weren't babysitting us, but like in charge of another kid who was in my group. And he took us down to the beach on the coast with the Pacific Ocean. And the water was probably, no joke, 60 degrees. It was cold as heck, but he gave us these boards and we're like, yeah, go out and, try to, see what you can do with the waves. And I was like, what do you mean, like surf? And he's like, well, just do whatever, just have fun. And I was like, okay. And I remember like diving into these waves, and the waves were crashing down, and the water was super cold, but like I was having so much fun. It was probably one of my best memories I've ever had. It's just experiencing these waves like crashing down and trying to dive underneath the waves. And it was super overcast and it wasn't very warm at all. And it was just, I don't know what it was, but it was just something that was like really, really fun. That's probably my favorite memory. So,
Aw, that sounds awesome.
All right. Next comment. Dunnock maybe, says, put together your League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And we were talking about this right before we started recording, where there's obviously ways to interpret this. So the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are typically a bunch of like characters like the Invisible Man or Dracula or Van Helsing that all combined into a group. So the way we're going to interpret this question is put together a group of 4 different characters from of whatever franchise you want as a group of characters you would love to see put in to make a really interesting movie.
Okay, so I went with a Ghibli route. So I picked my 4 favorite superpowered or superpowered the right word? Yeah, I guess superpowered gentlemen. So I have Howl from Howl's Moving Castle because he's totally cute. Haku from Spirited Away, the river spirit. Porco from Porco Rosso because he's an awesome pilot and he's a pig. And Baron Humbert von Guckiken from The Cat Returns, who's the talking cat, who's voiced by Carrie Elwes. So he's just automatically awesome. And he has a top hat. And he's a cat because he's the cat that returns.
That is a great list. I love it.
I would watch that.
Something that I'm stealing from someone I follow on Twitter is I don't understand why Disney hasn't done a princess crossover franchise. They're obsessed with this live-action remake thing, but I think it would be way cooler if they did all the princesses having adventures together. And they sort of did this in Wreck-It Ralph 2. I have a couple quibbles with how they did it because I think they weren't very sensitive to the actual voices and characters of the princesses involved. They tended to go more for easy jokes rather than thoughtful voicing and characterization. But in the end, it was a really fun part of that movie, and I don't understand why they don't make that into a franchise, because the princesses are this huge franchise, and I don't see why a crossover wouldn't be more interesting to people than let's cast some high-profile or controversial people and do a live-action version of movies that we can already see. I think that is much more creatively interesting and fulfilling than the kind of laziness that we're seeing for the last 3 years and that we're probably going to see for the next 10 in increasing order. Ugh.
It's because they just make too much money.
Do you have any princesses in particular you'd like to see, or you just want all of them?
Well, I mean, I think everyone knows my favorite princess is Rapunzel from Tangled, and I also love Belle from Beauty and the Beast. So those would be my two favorites, but I like most of them. Even the ones I don't like the movies from, like Brave, I really like Merida. I just don't like her movie at all.
So my 4, I can't honestly see how you could connect these into making a movie, but I'm going to do it anyway. It would be Batman, James Bond, King Kong, and I'm trying to think of who I would put as the last one. Harry Potter. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. So let's put those 4 into a movie and see what we can come up with.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that would be mine.
I'd read that fan fiction.
Yeah. So looking over the questions, it's actually the last one we had. We don't have any more. So we can do this again, although I mean, I'll put out a call if we are in need of more of these crazy questions. But you can always choose to just leave these crazy questions in a comment over on the site or on Discord, and we'll be sure to talk about them one way or the other, because if you ask them and we see them, then we'll make sure that we talk about them in the next episode. So hopefully I think we've been doing these for at least, it's been almost 30 something minutes. So I think you guys probably enjoyed that, because every time we talk about stuff that isn't me talking about how badly I am upset with the overall story of Tom King, then hey, everybody likes it. So that being said, be sure to leave your comments over on the site on the podcast post, or you can leave your comments on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Discord, wherever you listen to them. Just be sure to tag us so that we know that you're leaving comments for us, because that obviously helps us port those questions over to the website. In addition to that, you can support us on Patreon. That's always greatly appreciated. And if you are unable to support us financially, we are always looking for more people to join our staff. We have a variety of different positions available. Video editors is something that we're specifically seeking out. Even if you're not super skilled with video editing, I'm currently looking for someone to do minor videos. We're going to hopefully do some more stuff on YouTube in the near future. So that is a hope that we really have. So if you have any sort of video editing skills, even if it is just, starting out, and you probably know more than me, because I don't know anything about video editing, and that's part of the reason why some of this stuff is not helping, or is not really happening as much as I'd like it to. So video editors, we're also looking for more people to review comics. We know as we know, there is a slew of new books coming in August, September, and October that we will be needing coverage for. And we've had a couple of people who have recently stopped reviewing comics, so we need to fill in their spots. And then obviously we need people to help fill in some of the other things. So if you're interested in reviewing comics, reach out to me at TBU@thebatmanuniverse.net, and I'll work with you to get you set up on the site. As well as if you're interested in writing news for the site, or you're a graphic designer, or you have any special skills you'd just like to share with the site in general, just reach out to me, TBU@thebatmanuniverse.net, and we will find a place for you to help. In addition to that, be sure to head over to the website for all the latest news related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, and of course the comics. San Diego Comic-Con is underway as you're listening to this, so we'll be having all kinds of news posted on the site in regards to what's happening at San Diego. Outside of that, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and obviously our Discord as well. Anywhere you want to talk to us, we're available all over the place. Pretty much all of the staff is also on Twitter, and you can follow them by looking at the Batman Universe profile and finding their Twitter handles, because we follow all of them. So that being said, that is everything for this episode. I do want to remind everybody that July is a 5-week month, so the next episode we have will actually be in 3 weeks, not 2 weeks. So be aware of that. But in the meantime, if you are a Patreon supporter, we are going to be making a strong effort to try to get a bunch of content released in the next couple of weeks. As you're listening to this, I should have posted at least 3 new episodes in last week. So there's that, and there's more coming. So I've got plans for stuff, and if you're a Patreon supporter and you've got something specific you'd like us to chat about in the near future, you can always shoot us those suggestions as well. So with that being said, that is this episode. This is Dustin.
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
You've been listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic
Hi, I'm
Podcast.
Dan Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.